We are in a volatile market. The tariffs are on, the tariffs are off. Which way is the market going? Is it going up? Is it going down? If you're a beginner, you may be frustrated. If you are an experienced trader, you may be like, man, can you please step out of the way off of my charts with these news headlines and these tweets, right? So whichever side you're on, I'm here to give a little bit of hopefully breath of fresh air to give you an idea of what's really going on. I'm a huge technical person or TA person myself. I love to look at the charts primarily. However, I'm fairly good at reading the economy as far as these data reports that are coming out, what's happening with Trump and or Powell, Fed Powell and the rate decision, how we're looking economically, what the consumer sentiment is, because that will give you an overall read of, is this a real pump and bullish market that we're in? Or are we going to get hit with hard news data coming in pretty soon and there's fear injected back in the market? Okay. So how do you trade? How do you invest in this type of market? I'm gonna give 3 different ways you can look at it, and you can adjust based off of your style and also how active you are in the markets. If you are a trader and you're active every single day or every other day and you're looking at the charts, at least glancing at them, then you may want to be more privy to, smaller term levels of where we pivot and where we go. It will give you a sentiment. If you are a long-term investor and you're just holding and you don't look at the market for, a couple of months or whatever, and you're up and you look at your portfolio and you're green, but you're not paying attention to, maybe you should trim some profits. Maybe you should look at buying back in. Should you go back cash? Whatever it may be, depending on your investment strategy. Okay. So I know there's a lot of folks out there that don't even look at charts. They just buy whatever, do whatever. So we are in a overall bullish market right now, higher highs, higher lows, right? And we are trending upwards. That can't be undeniable. However, these pullbacks are getting very drastic to where you want to make sure that where you entered and you bought in, that you're protecting yourself. And if, you have more room and wiggle room to continue to hold, right? Depending on if you're trading and or long-term investing. All right. So without further ado, you can check more about myself, join our Discord. We do have a Discord, Leverage University. That is our entrepreneurial group for my life coaching, business coaching, as well as our trading floor. And if you'd like to join that, you're more than welcome to. There should be a small discount code once you click on the link that pops up for you, and you can join for a monthly fee. You can pay for the year. You can join weekly, whatever you want to do. And yeah, we'd love to have you inside to give more strategic long-term investing, right? So it's not just trading. It's also, hey, where do I buy these shares of these things? If I want to grab up 10, 20, 100, 1,000 shares of whatever, that may be the next boom over the next, year, Brian, what can I buy right now? If I don't want to trade, I want to do a little bit safer. Or if you want to learn how to day trade or swing trade, things like that, I am live trading every single day. All right, mouthful. Let's jump into it and give you some headlines here. So we have a lot going on. So number one, we had NVIDIA earnings that reported yesterday. They had very good earnings that came out, and their guidance was forward looking, right? They didn't really have that shaky guidance where other tech stocks and other sentimented reportings have come in, where NVIDIA just said, hey, I'm going right to 140, 143, and I'm going to hold up at those, new highs, right? So that was a good thing for the market. NVIDIA kind of saved the market. Now, a lot of folks that I've been seeing around the Twitter streets, the thread streets, right, even here on YouTube, is there's some folks that said, well, NVIDIA, shot the market up overall after hours, and that wasn't necessarily the case, right? The case last night where you saw those big pops, I had my community ask me last night and said, hey, why is Apple up from 200 to 207? It's because the court, right, Supreme Court halted and blocked President Trump from kind of continuing on with these tariffs. They said, you have no obligation. You can't continue to do this, right? And we know that, that doesn't really fly with this man. So this morning, what happened, or today, there was talks of him appealing. And you can see here, Trump tariffs reinstated by the appeals court for now. Okay, so nothing changed. We're back on. All right. So that's essentially what's happening right now, is you have a lot of overnight news that's coming in that, in my opinion, you have to understand what's going on in the economy, which is our fundamentals, and then read the charts to understand, are we approaching resistance? Because this news was released pushing right into a heavy macro resistance area where sellers were ready to shoot it right back down. So it was pretty obvious or oblivious that, hey, this is overstated. They put out this news, they blocked it, pushed the market right up into resistance and brought it right back down where they could take profits overnight and after hours and put their orders in and leave the retail investor, i.e. you and I, to chase the move to the upside. Okay. Now, another thing that's came in is Fed Chair Powell met with Trump at the White House today, at the time of this recording, Thursday, and told him rate decisions can't be political. Now, they've been having this beef back and forth where Trump is pressing his hand to say, hey, we need you to cut rates. And we know why. The reason he wants to cut rates, because he wants to refinance the US debt, which is at 36 or 37 trillion, I believe. Don't quote me on that, but it's 36, 37 trillion, something in the $30 trillion in debt for the US economy. So he's trying to refinance that at a lower interest rate to bring it back down. And also, he wants that for Americans so he can say, hey, I lowered your interest rates. Go refinance a home. Go do whatever you want to do with your new low interest rates. Right. But Powell is pretty much saying we can't cut these rates too soon because our economy is very shaky right now. If we cut too fast, then whatever your opinion is, that is what's going on. So Powell's not listening to Trump. Trump's saying, yeah, okay, I'll continue on with my tariffs things, but I'll keep forcing your hand. I'll keep telling everybody everything's good. You need to cut rates, whatever it might be. So that's where you're having this back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. Okay. So let's go to the charts and kind of look here and read some headlines really before we go to the charts. And we can see U.S. Appeals Court reinstates Trump tariffs during an appeal. We could see that being in Europe makes me feel better about the U.S. Okay. White House says the U.S. trade policy will continue. White House says president has other authorities for tariffs. Cool. White House says thanks Musk for his service because if you didn't know either, Elon Musk is kind of parting ways from his governmental duties and going back and focus on his companies. So that's why Tesla or TSLL are both kind of continuously to hold up and pressing up into new highs. All right, let's go into the overall market here and let's show you some specific levels of how this was very, very predictable. Okay, let's go into the futures market here. And I want you to look at this level on ES, okay? ES futures, okay? Anytime we're approaching a very big psychological level, okay? And if you're a beginner or a newbie, I understand this might look like gibberish. You can go check out my charting video and it'll show you exactly, okay? So these candlesticks are essentially just showing us price action over a interval of time. I'm on a weekly time frame, so each candlestick represents what happened during that particular week, okay? So the top wicks of a candle kind of tell us that there's some selling pressure that's coming in or profit taking, okay? The bottom wicks at a support level, you kind of see there, support, bottom wicks, very heavy green candles continuously trending upwards, tell us that buyers are continuing to buy the dip, okay? And here is our dip buy the dip, buy the dip, and we're forming this trend of higher lows, okay? But what we're seeing now on this weekly time frame is that we're starting to stagnate a little bit right in this channel, and that's called consolidation. Okay, so when we stagnate in this kind of consolidation channel, it's preparing and trying to take in what it wants to do next. Okay, and that coincides with what's going on with our fundamental news data. Right, the market's like, do I want to go higher, or do I want to take some profits because I don't know if the tariff pause is real? Is he going to instill new tariffs? Right? Are they making a deal? They not making a deal? So that's what you're seeing right in kind of this area of a weekly time frame, which kind of started at the beginning of May, or the middle of May, excuse me. So we pushed up into new highs and broke above this 5,800 psychological level. Okay. So going back to my psych levels are round, even numbers that stocks like to move towards and react off of. So you can see that 5,800 line. I'm going to just mark it there, 5,800. And I know I have it at 5,806, but 5,800. Okay. See that big bullish candle where we broke above, came back, retested, held it, and then broke and tried to retest the high again, and then failed that high to sort of form somewhat of a lower high on a weekly time frame for right now. Okay. It's kind of, it's a little bit more indecisive versus a significant lower high. Okay. But we see that right into 6,000 on ES is where the market pushed up into last night with that, hey, we want to block your tariffs, Trump. But they pushed it right up into a level where sellers were ready to sell on the stock, or excuse me, on the index or the futures ES, and also where there was some profit taking at those levels. Okay. So that was why I said earlier in the video here that experienced traders, and I'm not saying I'm that person necessarily, because in my opinion, every trader, every investor has more room to learn because there's different markets each year, each quarter, right? And each season. So you're constantly adapting. But the more you see things, the more you know what's predictable. So when I said this was pretty predictable that we were probably going to have some heavy selling and failure today, simply because we needed to get above that 6,000 on ES. Now, if you want to know what that was on SPY, if you're a SPY person, that was right into about 598 on SPY. Okay. And that's where we were after hours. So that was 598 that we hit and touched. If you can see there, see that big sell candle right there at 598 last time? See that wick at the top and it fell back below down, and see how it held at support at 598. So we really need to get above 600 confidently to go higher. And we could potentially end the month off with a push above 600. We don't know. We still have PCE data and consumer sentiment tomorrow. A massive Friday to end the month off. So it's going to be very interesting tomorrow how we end it off. And I wanted to prepare you for what to look for. All right. So on SPY, and also for my futures folks, it's very difficult to want to continue to have calls unless PCE data and consumer sentiment sends us through the roof above 601, and then we hold above 600. Okay. Like I'm talking about for continuation, like you're holding calls or you're saying, hey, we have another leg up back to all-time highs, right? It's very tough with this aggressive failure back underneath after hours. Do you see that candle right there? Okay. Here's the big after hours candle. We pushed up into 598, big failure back below. And that failure brought us back below previous. This was on the 19th. So 10 days ago, I think it was like last Tuesday or so, back below that previous high. Okay. And back below also previous day high, which was 593 roughly. Okay. So you see where that sell candle stepped in at 593. So we're stair stepping down, right? And then we got to reclaim and get back above, which is possible. So if we get back above this 593, then we can push back and retest 595, 596. So I'm not saying that we're going to fall tomorrow again with more selling pressure, because guess what? We're in that channel and we're holding up a key support here, which is 588 and 589. Okay. Which is right here. You can see how we held up that level after hours. Okay. So as long as we're above, just say 588. Okay. On SPY. Right here. As long as we're above that, bulls are going to continue to try to retest the high to take it out. Now, if we get below it significantly and we close below 586, that's our trigger point that aggressive sellers will step in. So 586, watch 586 on SPY. If we get below 586, you will see 583. And if it gets even more aggressive, we could see 580 again. Okay. So 586 is kind of that low level end of support, where if we fail back below that 588 and get below 586, that's where 583 is going to come in. 583 is really where we lose the bottom out. Okay. That is kind of the last line of defense as holding 583, which was right here. Okay. So those are your levels on SPY, pretty clear. So line in the sand, 588, as long as we're above that, you don't want to short or have puts into 588. You only want to have it in this range up here, about 596. Okay, trade the range from 596 back down to 588. That is your range for right now. If we get out of that range, then we can have continuation one way or the other. Okay. On QQQ, 523 was that big failure level. Okay, 523 was that big failure level. On my NQ folks, do you see how this was previous support that needed to hold up and it couldn't hold up? So we're going to turn that back into line style. Why isn't it popping up for me here? Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it back up. So it allows me to change. Yeah, there we go. Change the color there. So now we're turning this back into resistance. So that NQ 21,500. Okay. If you want to mark 21,600, you can, but I'm just going to mark 21,500, which is, or 21,550. All right. In this zone right here, those previous wicks right there at 21.6, 21.6, and we could not hold up that 21.6 because what I mean by that for those, because I have a lot of new folks on here. So if you're listening, watching, and your experience, you can go ahead past this. That's perfectly fine. But we typically want this, right? That's what we wanted today for bulls to continuously hold up the market, and we fell back below that. Okay, so we've got to reclaim 21.6 to get back above, and that would be on QQQ. We got to get back above that 523.50. Okay, 523.50. If you want to just make it 524, got to get back above that 523.50, and then we can start pushing back up into 530. Okay, but as long as we're underneath this 522.50 or 523, just look left, see those rejections right there, right there, right there, right? It could get even more aggressive back down like that. Okay. Now we're not going to lose those levels until we break underneath 518. Okay. If you want to mark 517.50, you're more than welcome. Okay. But if we break underneath 517.50, we're going to 515, maybe 514. And then if we lose 514, that's where the bottom falls out. Okay. That's where the bottom falls out, is underneath that 514, which is that previous support. And then it will start forming lower highs like this. And then we've got 510, 512 in sight. So still bullish above 518. Okay. But now we're in this channel between 518 and 523. So mark 518 to 523. That's how it looks in this box right here. So if that helps you to draw a box or to keep it in that channel right there, consolidate. We got data tomorrow. Either pushes it back up above 523 or pushes us underneath 517.50. In this range, I really wouldn't touch it too much in here unless you're scalping. Okay. In and out of trades very quickly. All right. All right, let's go to NVIDIA. I did take a little bit of NVIDIA puts today. Wish I would have held the top tick entry here. And the reason being is because I saw the market getting a little bit weak. I saw QQQ continuing to fall down lower. And I like that resistance at 143 on NVIDIA for a failure. So that was roughly about 100% trade. Here we go. I had a runner left in. If I go to our day trade signals and go here, right there. Okay. Can see at the time, signaled that. Now, this was the second entry I signaled. The first entry was right at the top of this candle, right off open. That failure of 143, entered, some puts, got stopped out right at break even or so. And then it just ran without me. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll re-enter once I get a little bit more clarity because it's a Thursday, right? Still in my 140 puts, 530, targeting 137 if we can get underneath 140. Stop loss above 143. And I gave some put ideas for a little bit more safety until next week. Okay. So there we go. There's my runner left in. Trim majority just left a runner, 25%. It went 37% and then started to fill this gap, as you can see right there. And then the runner went to 106%, and then we took profit there. Okay. I even gave the support below, saying that it needs to hold 136, 137 to make sure everyone understands that that is support down here for right now on NVIDIA. So I know a lot of folks want NVIDIA to go to 150. It needs a little help from the market, and it's still holding above its support range. Okay. See how NVIDIA bull flag broke above, coming back to retest 136, 137. So it almost looks very similar to QQQ, if you can see there. But instead, QQQ had a little bit of weakness simply because Apple was weak. You had Amazon that was also weak, and a couple other tech stocks that were pulling back, and semiconductors that were pulling back. So you can see there that looks very similar to NVIDIA, but NVIDIA is still above its support to go higher, right? So if I go back to NVIDIA, you can see there that it did not fail back underneath that level, okay? So for right now, NVIDIA, as many of you probably already suggest, like, oh man, NVIDIA is bullish, it's going to 150. Yeah, but now it's in this new zone, okay? So NVIDIA got out of the previous zone of consolidation. It's in a new zone. Okay. So you want to trade in this new zone from 137 up to 143. And then it breaks above 143. Then you can get continuation to the next level. Okay. We're stair stepping our way up, and we can stair step our way down. All right. Now, please be mindful as well that this is all contingent on what the market does with data. Okay. So if data is good, I expect obviously for NVIDIA to try to retest that high like that. Okay. If data is a little bit poor and the market continues to sell off, remember paying attention to QQQ and SPY always. NVIDIA, if it starts fading underneath this 137 like that and then struggles, right, we could see a failure back to 130. And that wouldn't be necessarily good for like bullish NVIDIA folks, okay, in the short term, okay, because we failed that breakout to come back lower. All right. So don't have your emotions involved when you're just saying, hey, it's NVIDIA, it's going higher. Yeah, you can say that, but you have to trade and watch the levels to make sure that they hold so you can continue to, have that continuous uptrend movement. All right. The reason why I'm saying that, look left, is that this is what we said last time NVIDIA got up in this range, hit 143, pulled back to 137, came up to 140, and then came all the way back down to 120. Okay. So just need that to hold because that's what it was trying to do last time it got to this level. See, right around in this zone is a interesting struggle area for NVIDIA. Okay. There's sellers stacked up all in this zone. Okay. Sellers, 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 big sell candle, sell candle, sell candle, sell candle. And we're kind of getting another one. Okay. Only difference is these were lower high, lower high, lower high, lower low, lower low. This is a different trend. Okay. So we've got to break trend for NVIDIA to get more selling. But until then, it's going to continuously, every dip's going to get bought. It's going to try to push itself a little bit higher. So my first signal for a little bit of weakness would be falling back underneath that 136 level. Okay. Back underneath that 136 and holding underneath 137. That would be kind of my, okay, this is failing. We've got that potential in play. All right. But until then, continuously, if you're bullish on NVIDIA, it's holding up its level. Okay. You can see right there. Now, if it fails another time, here's another idea for NVIDIA for anyone that's like, hey, Brian, what if it pops back up here? I would not chase, again, do not chase into resistance, because this could be a double top and come right back down. Okay. You need it to clear above that 144 level. Okay. It needs to clear above that 144. Okay. To go higher. Otherwise, anywhere popping up into here and there's resistance again, it could just roll right back over. Please be mindful of that on the video. All right. All right. Google starting to get heavy up here. It's looking like a double top on Google. If the market continues to hold now, Google again, it's one of the strongest kind of sleepers, in my opinion, in the Mag 7, but it's just being held down from going any higher until data comes out or there's some good news in the market, right? Just getting very heavy sell signals or profit taking right here, right? And Google's made a nice move off of 147 to pretty much 176. Okay. So nice, almost $20 plus move, and it looks good long term, but it's got to hold this trend, because if it starts failing this trend underneath 173 and getting like that, then there is that possibility. And the reason I keep talking about downside possibilities, because most people, especially beginners, in my opinion, they only think the market goes up and up and up and up. In the long term, yes. But in the short term, if you see green and you buy up here, right, there's a lot of downside potential that could pull you back, depending on if you're in a trade and or if you bought shares at 170. You've got to be prepared to buy back at 150 as well, or dollar cost average even lower. If you are, great. You don't really care where you buy because you're holding for 10 plus years. But for trading purposes, right, if you enter calls right here looking for this, right, that's a possibility, right? But if I go long and trying to go to 180 on Google, you have to keep your stop loss, in my opinion, at 170. Okay. Got to keep your stop loss at 170, because if we lose 170, something like that, then your risk has the potential to come all the way back down to 163. So do you want your risk to reward to look like that? No, you want it to look more like this. Okay. So the best trade to take on Google, if you're bullish on Google in the short term, if you're looking for calls, is to let it break above 177 for continuation. Okay. If you're like, hey, Brian, I want to trade the downside, then trust this resistance, right? Trust this resistance. If the market gets weak, keep your stop loss right at that 176 and try to target 164. Okay. 164, 168. Right here. And roughly right there. Okay. So I like this trade in the short term a lot better than the upside trade as the market's getting heavy into resistance. All right. So that's really an educational point there for anyone that's like, hey, why is the market selling off? Every time I get into calls, it shoots down the next day. Every time I get into, whatever trade you get into, it's like something happens the opposite of what I think. I thought the market was bullish, right? And that's really what a lot of us, in my opinion, on these, public spaces are trying to just show people, okay, is what's the risk to reward? Why we say don't chase the move, or make sure you protect your profits with a stop loss that's in profit, or a stop loss that, has very little risk to it. Okay. Apple, Here's another one, and I'll round out this video because it's kind of a midweek. Apple, that tariff news came in. We know Apple is very susceptible to any T word, any tariff word with their chips, right? And their production in China and whatnot. So Apple was going to be one of the main ones that was going to pop on the block of the tariffs, and then the tariffs are back on, sell right back off. Okay. So still selling pressure on Apple. Once the tariffs kind of clear up, I think Apple is a great buy around this 195 and 190 level, right? Because there's all this upside. You saw what it did when the tariffs got announced that, hey, we're good, everything's good. So Apple is going to be one of the first that, as we know, I know it has some struggles and people have some other comments and whatnot about it, but Apple has the potential to try to go back up to that 225 level once all this tariff news and whatnot is done. So watch 195 on Apple as another support to step back in. Okay. And then also watch 200 to try to hold. And then we want to watch that reclaim of 203. Okay. So 203 gets back above. We can retest trying to get back to 210. If 203 continues to resist and continues also to hold underneath 200, all right, then those are heavy resistances for right now, and we continue this downward trend. Okay. Amazon, another one, popped on the block of the tariffs. It's back underneath that 207. Okay. So we can see that 207 is a resistance. It needs to get back above there. If it stays underneath 207, you see the potential to go back to 200, to go back to 200, and then go back to 200 again. Okay. So this is all based on what happens with the data and the news tomorrow with the consumer sentiment, which direction it chooses. Okay. Below this 207, great. Can take it down. Break below those previous lows would be your pivot. Okay. And you know, you've got nothing but room. Straight up move. It'll be a straight down move down to 200. Okay. My Tesla folks. All right. It's getting heavy up here. However, a lot of y'all are still bullish on Tesla. Right. And rightfully so, if it's breaking out of this consolidation, bull flag. But as we know, anytime there's a breakout, there's always a retest. So if we retest back to that 350 level and hold that 350 and retest back up, then we can continue the move upwards towards that 380 target. If we hold above 360 or reclaim 360, then that is simply looks like this. Break, retest, and then go. Okay. If we lose and get back below kind of that 350 mark, right, then you can maybe trade and scalp it down into that 340 again. Okay. But what you really want as a Tesla bull is you want this to hold above those previous highs, roughly at 351 to 353. Okay. And that's all contingent on what these levels do with the data and the news tomorrow. Okay. I think everything looks the same. All right. Big resistance, 660 stepping in on Meta. All right. Getting heavy. We still have those gaps below, but 640 on Meta. Robinhood, beautiful, beautiful rejection. Robinhood has been one of my watches at 67. I should have taken it today, but just didn't. All right. I think it is getting very, very heavy up here. As you can see, nice candle there, double top, along with a nice weekly inverted hammer candle. If I can see the week close on week, if I can see the week close week, then I think this could continue back down into 58 and potentially back down into 50 is like my big target leading into the next FOMC meeting. All right. So I'll be watching Robinhood. As you can see, it's getting a little bit heavy. I know it's, still has an upward trend, But if that trend starts to break, then you may want to target that 57 and then targeting 50 if it breaks underneath that 57. All right. Do a couple others. AMD. I know a lot of folks have that in their portfolios, and Palantir. I'll do Palantir first. Let's look at a weekly time frame. It looks very similar to, now some may call this a cup, and this is just forming a little handle to go higher. All right. I can see that for sure. All right. It's still holding up that 120 level, which is that previous candle close there. And we're still forming this upward trend. Okay. My only concern on Palantir is that it's just getting a little heavy. That's my only concern. All right. And what do I mean by heavy? I just mean that RSI, there may be some profit taking. Okay. So I'm very big on the technicals, and I don't care like what you think, up here. I'm looking risk to reward. Would I want to take a trade from here, 121 to 130 on this? Or would I want to, since I have a lot of action up here at 127, would I want to maybe try to get a little risk to reward short for that pullback into 110 like that, if that trend breaks? Okay. That trend breaks right here, gets underneath that 120. Because as you can see, every pop on Palantir is getting, pretty aggressively shorted. Pop, aggressive short, pop, aggressive short, big pop, fade, 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 fade. Now 120's got to hold. But if it doesn't hold and the market gives out, then we could have a straight down move, very similar to how this was a straight up move. Okay. So that's kind of the trade I'm looking more so on Palantir trade wise. Long term, continue to hold. Right. I think people get it twisted on when folks are like, man, Palantir is going to tank soon. It's like, it's not tanking. It's just pulling back, and you can take advantage of a trade idea versus, you're looking at a long-term perspective. Yeah. Palantir, $300, $400, $500, right? Stock split in the long term. Right. But you cannot deny that this is back at a big resistance. See this right here, 62 all the way to 127, pulled all the way back to fill that gap right there from their earnings move back to 75. Right. We got some gaps below, and we've been trending and trending and trending and trending. Is this that heavy pullback at some point? Right. If that trend breaks, yeah, it can be very similar to this candle. Okay. So watch that on Palantir. Keep that on your radar. It is a really nice mover. But it's got to get out of this zone. And the more it presses on these lows and lows and lows and lows, the heavier it gets up here, there's more sellers just stacked and stacked and stacked and stacked for a trading purpose, and also for a profit taking, like trimming profits. They ran it up, trimming profits, and then finally just say, hey, I'm unloading. It's not going any higher right now, so let me just unload, and it pulls back. Okay. So I'm pretty sure traders and or long-term investors had their stop losses sitting right at 120. So if 120 gives out, pretty much free fall. All right. AMD will be my last one. I've got Snowflake on watch too. It started to break this trend here. It's got a lot of room down the downside if it breaks underneath 200. AMD. You see AMD tried to pop, and it's still long-term looking great down here in this kind of upward trend. If you've noticed, AMD really hasn't broken out like NVIDIA did, right? NVIDIA looked like this before it just broke out, right? So any pullback on AMD, it's just simply consolidating, right? Simply consolidating. I would love a pullback, back to 105, back to 100, something like that. Because AMD, if you've noticed, broke out of this downtrend, kind of like this. You could do it here, but out of that downtrend, and it's forming higher lows, but it just can't go just yet. Can't go just yet. So keep your support at 108 and 110. 108 and 110. You can see right there, 107, 108, 108, 107, 108 right there. So it's going to try to hold that up for dear life. Okay. But if that trend breaks and gets underneath that 108, that's where you're going to get that 100. So as an AMD bull that wants to just, continuously see this finally break out, right? You want that high and 117 to be taken out, right? If a new high can be formed above 118, then we can get going. So the best trade on the upside, in my opinion, is wait for that break above 118, or wait for that 108, or wait for 100 again. Either way. All right. Still on a higher bounce. Okay. So watch 110 this week at the end of the week. All righty. That's it for me. Hymns. Just pulling back. Very similar to Robinhood. Just slowly starting to fade, pull back. All right. But Hymns coming into a psych level of 50 is going to be very interesting. Any big psych level like that, watching that could bounce. This could be a big cup, handle, and go again to retest the high. So watch 50 on Hymns. All right, everybody. Peace, love, and blessings to you. Hopefully this kind of end of the month, end of the week kind of summary gave you a little insight into what traders and or long-term investors are thinking, why the market sold off, why it popped after hours, gave you a little summary, and also gave you an insight into saying how we're not surprised, right? As I see all on Twitter and threads, how people were surprised and man, gave back all the gains. Like, why is this doing this? Like, I thought I was going to wake up and, be in super gains because I had calls that I swung, right? Things like that. I think this is more of a day trading and scalping market personally, unless you are, if you bought the dip in April, great, you're good. But if you're buying highs up here with option calls and or long dated option calls, you want to be very mindful that these pullbacks can be pretty drastic. Okay. All right. Love y'all. Peace, love, and blessings to you. I'll see y'all on Sunday for a new month for Stock Sermon Sunday going into June and preparing for our FOMC meeting, which is June 18th. All right. So I'm preparing for more profit taking heading into that meeting of June 18th. So start getting those SQQQ calls ready to hedge your portfolios, those SPXS shares and or SQQQ shares. Go back and listen to that last video where it says SQQQ, how to protect your portfolio, and you'll understand what I'm talking about. All right. Love y'all. Talk to y'all soon. Peace.